family is back.
Yeah. Okay. Welcome to Service Binding Operator Weekly Call. Today is September 2nd, 2021. Okay, let's start the topics for today. Documentation questions from Sri. Sri, you can go ahead.
Yeah, hello everyone. So as you see, I've completed the review for the exposing binding metadata PR, and sorry, my kid had come in. Okay, so I hope you would have taken a look at the review comments. So I would be starting my downstream documentation based on those review comments, which I will be showing it to Baiju tomorrow. And once he kind of approves the Word doc, I'll raise a PR immediately so that, and I'll inform it in the channel for everybody's review. That's one thing. Second thing I see this terminology usage of injection versus projection. Our documentation that I'm reviewing uses the terminology injection, but then the service binding specification is using projection. So as a user, I found it confusing when I looked at both the terminology. Like, is it the one and the same thing, or are they different? So I would like to stick to one terminology, which is projection instead of injection. So I want to know what team thinks about it.
I'm all for it. Yeah.
You are for using projection instead of injection.
Yeah.
Okay. What others are thinking? Because I know the guy who probably has been using injection. It's not me.
Well, I would say it's not the same, but a projection is the concept and injection is a means, basically. It's the actual act of getting it there, but the projection is more broad, more general.
Exactly for that reason, Pavel, because we are not really injecting anything in the application container. We are just exposing binding data so that they're accessible to application container, but we are not really physically inserting anything into container. They're just mounted files or environmental variables which are exactly around, you can see it as a context of the application container. So projection is, as you said, more generic term, which basically is similar to exposing, right?
Yeah.
Maybe we should be using exposing instead.
But yes, we could also use exposing, but then the spec itself uses heavily projection, and in order not to introduce two terms and then explain if needed difference, so if projection is clear enough, and I would say yes, then we should try to minimize the number of terminology we introduce into the whole thing.
Yeah, once again, Andy, I don't find the exposure the equivalent to projection, because exposure is just making something visible to the world, but projection is actually shining light somewhere to make a difference, right? So those things also are not the same from my perspective. So the projection is, I find the projection most appropriate.
So we can say exposing binding metadata by projecting blah, 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 whatever. And then mention the process of how it works, right?
No. Exposing binding metadata is different. I mean, the operator is the one that is doing the projection work, whereas the backing service author provides this binding metadata to expose this information. So I think we can use it both in different contexts. Is that okay?
Can you repeat that once again, Baiju?
Yeah. So whenever we're talking about exposing binding metadata, that is when in terms of the backing service authors, for example, annotations or dependent services, things like that. So there, it's a means for exposing and a mechanism for exposing. So let's use that exposing binding metadata there. Whereas whenever we are talking about the operator, what the operator does, that's actually projecting. Okay.
Right. So Shri, binding data needs to be first exposed by a service. I mean, make available sample for reading, and then operator comes into the game and reads them, and then project them into the application. Make sense? You're muted, or
Yeah, sorry, I was taking my notes and I thought I'm on unmute. Yes, it makes sense. Thank you. Probably I'll need a couple of meetings from you, Baiju and Pavel, to set it all right, once I word it. Thank you so much for the clarification. And second thing is that I noticed that there is a change in the specification 14 days ago with respect to the word called application. So wherever in the YAML the application is there, it's been changed to workload. Right now, our documentation that we are reviewing and working on is using application in the YAML, and in the documentation generally we refer it as application workload. So I just want to tell my observation that in the documentation, I feel like a user, it's good to retain by while explaining using the term application workload. Now or post GA, however it is, this is my suggestion. In the document when we explain, let's stick to the terminology application workload. But in YAML, at least I need a confirmation that for GA, at least we will be only using the word application and not workload. And if at all there is a change, it will only be post GA. So I want to know your take on that.
Shri, is it not like
Basically,
application
there are two questions.
workload, like redundant? Like
No,
application
there are-
work? No?
Predrag, let me clarify, sorry. I think there are two questions. One is about the documentation part. The other one is whether are we going to introduce that latest changes in the spec, where they change the word. That needs some changes in the YAML structure itself.
Yes, you're
So
correct.
let's keep this separate topics for discussion, in my opinion. Yeah. You getting my point, or I need explanation? In the spec, they
No,
recently
I-
changed this word application to workload. That happens throughout the spec. That PR got merged. But our current, the API in the YAML server for it is application. So, are we going to make the recent changes into the spec into our, as part of our GA release? Are we going to work on that feature or not? That's one question. Right?
Yeah, because there is a lot of work and it is very difficult to do all changes at the last minute, which is why I'm asking this
There is
question.
not a lot of work, there is some work. Yeah.
No, for us, we have to create a lot of files
Yeah.
and do it, right? From our document.
Yeah, that is documentation side. But the other one
Yes.
is the code we need to modify.
Yes, that also
Yeah,
is
but-
there. Correct.
Yeah, but you, like as you said, these are two different topics. But
Yeah,
like
yeah.
from documentation point of view, are we speaking about application workloads? I find it like redundant, like application or workloads. Why using both? I mean, to be honest, Shri, in general, in OpenShift documentation, are we deploying applications or deploying workloads on the cluster?
For now, it says application. Some places it also use workloads.
It's a mix for places, and that's why we had a lot of debate on the same in the spec also. I hope you remember that finally there was a voting and all, and some slightly majority went for up workload. That's why it ended up with workload in the spec itself. So,
So the documentation uses all three instances: application, workload, application workload. I find all three instances across the documentation in different places. I just run a check.
yeah, no consistency.
Mostly it is application, if I see. The top one is application, and the second is workload. Very few instances of both together, if I can say that.
I'm not particularly biased here, but since we are talking, I don't know, Seven, what do you think?
Still thinking. I like application because it's concrete. it's more concrete for end user and the developer, but at the same time, it feels a little bit reducing the potential. So the service binding could be used by different things that are not necessarily categorized as an application. So
How different is application from a workload? Because I see another instance in the documentation which says add applications, comma workloads, comma or services. So which means these are two different things, right? It says application, you can add application, you can add workload, or you can add services.
a workload could be an application, in my mind, at least. A workload could be an application, it could be a service, it could be
Yeah, workload is more general, like, and actually I would say umbrella term for the application and services. So workload is any set of containers, in case of Kubernetes, deployed on the cluster, which kind of work together towards something. And it could be just a service, it could be application, could be whatever, jobs, anything like that. So workload is, like, I would say, the most generic term of all others, describing some work which is executed by cluster. I mean, that's kind of how I see it.
So for clarity, I feel prefer application, but at the same time, workloads works fine. Application workload, I agree with Predrag, is kind of redundant.
So what exactly should we use, at least for now, because I'm doing the work, right, documentation work. So for documentation and for the YAML, what is the terminology that I should stick to is what I want to know.
But I don't think that we should pick just single one. Say workload, as I said, is a generic term and fine, but maybe in a particular sentence, in a particular paragraph or section, if we are talking about pet clinic, for example, that's definitely an application. So, and then we should use application as a term. But if we speak about general properties of a service in some section where we speak about service binding operator and the feature list something, then we should use there a workload as a term that we can say, you can bind any workload to any service or whatever in that sense. But whenever we can use we should use more specific word, we should use it. I mean, it will make the text only more understandable, right? Why we should stick to only single word and use it across all the text. You understand what I mean, Sri? So, like, there are like parts of the docs where we are describing generic and general properties of service binding, whereas there are particular examples or scenarios we want to cover where we know that we are talking about either a service or job or application, and we should name them like that.
Yeah, that I got it clear. Yes.
Does it help, Sri?
Yeah, it does. I'll try to word it and send it, and we'll see. Thank you.
By the way, since Andy is in the call, and I think you're the only native speaker, please, if we are telling some nonsense, please raise your hand.
Well, okay, so far what you said, in my opinion, is correct. Application, yes, can be a little narrow in scope in terms of how I kind of view the word. Either term works, in my opinion. Workload is probably the better term to use, but they both would both work in this scenario, I think. because as you said, application kind of assumes, okay, maybe you have something like a web application running, which doesn't necessarily capture all the scenarios we could be running under. Does that make sense, or am I?
No, it does.
Yeah, so with regarding to the creating service binding peer review, I'm not sure whether I'll have the time completely to do the review before GA. I'll try my best, but I think the content is also, I'm doing the other thing also. So I'm really not sure. I'll have to, it's just like shouting wolf, right? I want to say that I might not be able to do a complete review for creating service binding PR, just letting you know.
Okay.
Okay.
So
You have any other questions, Ray? Or
Am I missing something, Baiju?
no? I think those were the two important questions that you had in mind. Yeah. Right.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
So speaking about the documentation, we also need to move our documentation under the Red Hat Developer Organization. I don't know if you have been speaking about that yet or not, but that is something we need to schedule.
Okay, when you say move, do you mean like I kind of my understanding that we're gonna take this content, what was produced, and put it in the service binding repo in some files, or maybe in some GitHub Pages branch and service from there.
Yeah.
Okay. No additional repo. That's one, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I think GitHub Pages support serving from a directory also. That means it need not be the top level
Correct.
directory. It could be just a docs
Right.
type.
Right.
Yeah.
But we have a green light for when we could start working on that. So a couple of more PRs needs to be merged, and then we're gonna do. I mean, I would like to do it once and then continue working in the main repo afterwards. So
yeah.
What we are waiting for? So we need to merge.
Yeah. Let's wait for the 3 PRs to be merged, okay? Because there are already discussions in that PR. Sri, I am addressed most of the review comments from Sri today. I'll be doing it for the Steven has put some more comments in the other PR. So let me address all of them, and then Predrag, maybe you can also take a one round, and then we can merge. Anyway, I don't see we need to hurry in that sense because content is wherever it is, it's good. So
no, at least by 15th or at least by 20th, if we can do it, because I'll have placeholders in the OCP documentation, right, to particular sections. So I'll have to link it to them. At least if we have 5 to 10 days before that, for reviewing, scrubbing, people would want to see where it is, right, while reviewing. So at least by 20th, if we have all the content in place, it will be good. That'll help.
Well, to be honest, I would really like to see that content moved, say, latest next week, if there is no any particular objection.
Yeah, I'm fine as long as once I address all the review comments which is there existing, I'm okay, because even further reviews comments we can take it from the other reports, right? And they can send more PRs. And regarding the hosting, so currently I hope Predrag, you are up to date about the domain thing, right? I mentioned regarding that servicebinding.io, we are going to use the API group name for the CRTs that Red Hat has procured that domain right now. Red Hat also procured another domain, servicebinding.dev, as a backup or something. So if you really need to host our content, we could use the .dev domain, so that means there is no conflicts of anything. Steven, what do you think? Should we use that one? We could ask the team to point to this CNAME point to this repo, GitHub CNAME, so we can serve that content from that domain.
Sorry, I
Upstream
wasn't.
Okay.
I was
Right now we have procured service binding.dev domain. There is no use right now, but servicebinding.io we reserved for the spec purpose. That means the API CRD group. So let's not use that domain right now, because maybe they have some plan to keep some content or something. Maybe the spec itself, maybe in a better style or something they can keep. So we can use a dev domain, servicebinding.dev, to serve the content. The upstream.
So I don't think that that is a good idea.
Oh, is
And
it?
the reason is that our implementation is going to be the Red Hat implementation, and we need to provide documentation that is related to that particular implementation. If you have service binding.dev and service binding.io that exists together, then you are creating confusion for what is the upstream project. You are creating confusion, and you are also making a marketing problems, because when you will try to funnel onto one target, you have big opportunities that it will go to the other one. So I think having our documentation behind service binding, Red Hat service binding operator.io or something like that, behind our GitHub pages will work for me. So.
But what is the then domain we can use then? Who can find out?
For the domain for our documentation?
Yeah.
I think I will just use the name of the repository, and if you go to the name of it should just be it does not need a particular domain name. We just use the name of the repository, and we serve that as a documentation.
With the GitHub inside of the GitHub domain.
Yeah.
So you don't want to have any particular other nicer Red Hat domain, say, where we're going to serve our project and so on.
We don't do that on other projects.
But we have Shipwright, for example.
Yeah, but Shipwright is the upstream project. No?
Yeah, it is upstream, and we are considering our project also upstream, right? But of course, we have other.
I lost you for a couple of seconds. Can you repeat just last two sentences?
Shipwright is an upstream project.
Okay.
Tekton is
Odo has a domain, odo.dev, audio. Right? I don't know what is it. I think something like that. So
honestly, I think what is important for us is having this available.
Yeah.
No doubt. Just kind of thinking like if we can always edit later some other domain.
Absolutely. And I would love if we have servicebinding.io, which is about the specification, and then from servicebinding.io we can have a dedicated page which will speak about our implementation and redirect to our documentation. But if we are creating too many landing places related to service binding, it will deserve all the existing ones. So it's better to have one, which then is, in my opinion, it's better to have one landing page with a a good flow that is going to drive to the different implementations that might exist.
Okay, but for time being, we need to render this content somewhere and place it. So that's okay to keep it in that github.io, whatever the default domain that GitHub provides, right? We are good with that.
Yeah.
Okay, let's for short term, let's do that way, and that way we'll have this that served from directly from GitHub. So no domain for now. But you're okay with that, right?
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay. Yeah, so no domain. Let's serve directly from the content. Okay. Any other topic? I can just give a kind of update what is going on with the spec recently, last few weeks. If you are all want to know what is happening, is that okay?
Yeah, please go
Just
ahead.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So I think the spec has reached a good milestone where it can make a GA release. There was one major roadblock blocker, that was the domain confusion regarding whether to move to Kubernetes SIG apps or some other special interest group. So that discussion is still going on, but it may take more time. So the by API by group domain name for now decided to keep a separate domain instead of waiting for that foundation or Kubernetes SIG thing to happen. So for now, we decided to use a domain, and Red Hat has procured that domain, servicebinding.io, and the domain is going to be binding dot. I mean, CRD API group name is going to be binding.servicebinding.io. So there is a PR opened with that change from Scott, and later today that hopefully that will merge today itself, unless there is any objection from any others. So once that PR is merged, I think we are very close to make a 1.0 release. There is one more blocker issue that me, Predrag and all raised a few weeks back regarding that other feature in the spec to address the supporting custom locations for binding projections. So that issue also, there is a PR. At least in principle, everyone is in agreement with that proposal. But the PR itself is going on in work in progress. So I already added few review comments, and so yeah. So these are the two PRs that need to be merged before making a GA, in my opinion. Otherwise, there is no other blocker issues right now in the spec to make a GA release. Okay, so that's about the spec. And
Baju, a question to the group API name. What is the motivation for adding a binding prefix in front of service binding? Is it like that really redundant thing only?
Yeah, that's some kind of observation. I made that proposal. In fact, you could still add. This is my observation. I noticed. Okay, in everywhere, I don't see anyone use the naked domain. See, naked domain means servicebinding.io is a naked domain, right? There is no subdomain. So such kind of domains we call naked domain. So I don't see that kind of naked domain used anywhere in the other group. I just had a look at overall, other places in the Kubernetes community, other place. So I don't see that pattern anywhere. But at the same time, I see that I got, and also one more observation I made is when you generate the, this is just observation in the Kube Builder or Operator SDK, they always ask for the domain, then again they ask for a separate group also. So normally what they do is that they combine these two and then create a subdomain always. So based on this recommendation, I put that proposal, and I can see Scott is also in agreement, and that's how this it came like binding dot. I couldn't come up with any other subdomain. Maybe I thought maybe we could use apps dot service binding dot org.
Baju, But basically, if I may, you said that you didn't see any like the group version to be other than nor with the subdomain. But right now, I'm working with the pipelines, and their resources have group name just tecton.dev. So
Oh, really?
that is the case. Yes.
Oh, okay.
So,
So there is no
Tecton
subdomain.
resources, no.
Okay.
And I agree with Predrag that to having the bindings and after that the service binding. Just to mention that the resource like full name would be service binding service binding.io, which would be
Yeah.
ridiculous.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I missed the Stecton. Yeah, I agree. So maybe Predrag, if you can raise this as a comment in that PR, I am okay. I don't have strong opinion, but I felt like this is something commonly observed, so I suggested.
Yeah, but typically, commonly in a way that, for example, you have sorry, OLM. In OLM world, the group API name is core.operators.com, and of course,
Yeah,
when
right.
you have operators.com, which is very generic, you want to be specialized a bit, saying core and like extension and what's not. Now, we have selected such domain which is called service binding.io. Imagine that we landed into Kubernetes SIG, then our domain will be kubernetes.io, and of course, then it makes sense to add bindings in front of it. But like bindings.service binding is kind of, I don't know, like Pavel said. Of course, it works, but I don't know. It's not really the nicest.
I kind of agree. It feels rather redundant and
Yeah, and I also agree. So maybe I thought like we could use another word instead of binding, that like apps.servicebinding.io, but again that doesn't make that
well, but
sense.
we could use, for example, what will be good to use core, for example, because we are the service or whatever core, and then we have extension dot service binding for resources which belong to extensions and so on. So that could be the case.
Yeah. So I agree. I think these are really valid points, Pradak. So please make a comment in that Scott's PR, and let's continue the discussion there. So I don't have any strong objection to drop the subdomain thing. Okay. Yeah. So that's about that. And yeah, I think hope maybe in today's call we'll get much more clarity when they can make a spec release.
But is there any like timeline now for spec release?
At least I don't see any other. There are so many other issues in the backlog, but I don't see none of them really need to be addressed immediately for the GA for the spec. Okay, that's my opinion. Unless somebody say that there are quite a lot of around. I think let me just take a look how many issues. Yeah, there are 30 issues, open issues in that. But I already gone through all of most of them. There are some of the issues which I believe we could address post GA, may not be addressed before that. Okay. Except this domain name and that other PR from regarding that whatever, yeah, cluster application resource mapping. Yes, this is the most mandatory. And both of them, at least we have consensus, and I agree that this is a domain redundancy. So please raise a comment. Let's discuss in later call.
Okay.
Okay, nothing else from my side. Maybe.
Baiju, I wanted to just the team also. I wanted to know if the progress on that audio, how to use SPO via. So any content on that
Andy,
so
I
far?
believe Andy was looking to that one.
Okay.
Andy?
yes, I found that Odeo had some documentation demonstrating how to use Odeo Link, which and they require you to set up some SPO specific stuff for that. And I'm wondering if that kind of fulfills that need for Odeo documentation. If you want, I can post a link or something.
Well, you can Slack it to me for reference, but if we can get the content for that, initial content, how to do and all that, I think it will be great. So just wanted to know like by when it will be ready, the initial content.
Okay. Yeah, I'll Slack you a link and let me know if that's good enough. Otherwise, if it's not, I can get working on something and I can try to get it out like next Wednesday or something.
Are those the same step or procedure to be followed? Whatever you're gonna send, the content in that link.
I don't know off the top of my head, unfortunately.
Okay. Because we need to test it if it is really working, and only then
I have tested it. The audio
It's working?
documentation is accurate.
Okay,
I
great.
just don't know if it's comparable to anything else that SVO has already.
Okay. You Slack it to me the link kindly, and I'll have a look at it. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, I think we are almost time. If no other topics, maybe we can wind up now. Thank you all.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you all. Bye bye.
Thanks.